Hello, and welcome to Midwest Fantasy Football, week number 10. And back again in Aaron's garage. This seems to be working out pretty well to knock this thing out before we have Pool League in about an hour and a half. So we'll see how it goes. So
he just likes my internet speed.
His internet speed is awesome, as we've covered a few times. So it's much faster to do it here than it is anywhere else. So
I feel used.
Yeah, no, you enjoy it. All right. First matchup this week, Will's Galactic Gibbs Gang with a massive 168-point week, putting up over Derek's What the Hockey with 132 points. Man, that's a terrible loss with 132 points.
Yeah. I mean, Will's game was pretty obvious, right? Looking at Chase, 58.5 points, right? I mean, huge. And if I remember right, didn't that happen it happened early?
It was Thursday night. I texted Derek after he turned my trade offer down last week. I said, well, you might as well trade to me now because you already lost this week. So,
yeah, I mean, and then, beyond that, right? Pickens outscoring projection, Connor outscoring projection. Will just basically took every opportunity and just ran with it. Even with a couple players coming in slightly under and the rest coming in right where they were expected to, I don't think he had a hard time sleeping over the weekend worrying about the game.
No, not at all.
Derek, on the other hand, right, you had, Ridley did real well compared to what he was supposed to do, but then, you had Williams, McConkey just kind of dropping. The only other really good player you had, other than Ridley and Brown, was the Buffalo defense. So, would have been good against a lot of other teams, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jamar Chase was such a huge factor this weekend. Nick looked it up, and it's something like the 8th highest wide receiver score of all time. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. I saw a stat this weekend that said if you had both Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow on your roster this weekend, you won your matchup 98.9% of the time. They were such a just blowout factor for you this week. So, I mean, looking at this matchup, Derek put up 132 points. If Chase had come in somewhere around his average, 18, 19 points, he would have lost. So, I mean, it's just a huge game. Monumental tip of your cap to him. The player that I was trying to trade for was Tyreek Hill, who I see on your bench was 11 points. That wouldn't have done either of us any good anyways. So, I guess one of those things, I guess I'm glad now that I lost because now I can quit trying to pretend that I'm going to win and catch, and then still make the playoffs. So, we'll get back to that at the end of this video. So, moving on, next matchup I got highlighted was our closest. So that was our top score. This is the biggest blowout. Brandon's blown call with 138.7 over Trent's Deucing and Laporta John with 69 points.
Yeah. So, looking at Brandon's lineup, obviously had a couple standouts, right? I mean, Jackson coming in at 33 points, Robinson coming in at almost 33 points, Andrews and Philadelphia both doubling expectations. Really only had, obviously Lutz with 0 and Hill with 2, but, I mean, even with that, you had enough points that had Trent doubled his score, you would have beaten him. Trent doubles his score would have been 138.48. Still not enough.
Ouch.
Which is pretty awesome. Unfortunately for Trent, it was basically the opposite, right? It was just no standout performances. Everybody came in under projection or close to projection. There was no doubles. There was no big wins. Laporta was the closest to a surprise, and that was just at 6 points over expectation.
Sure. The players that I specifically noted, I mean, you talk about Sam Darnold this week. He was hot earlier in the year, and he has fallen off pretty hard. I know he was somebody was taking an MVP candidate, and 6 points this week, certainly lacking there. Antonio Gibson, only 2.5 points. And then, of course, the New York Jets continue their implosion, I guess you'd say. It's with a big old 0 bomb there. So, and then for Brandon, I did call out, he opted to try to get Justice Hill. Sometimes you're hoping that Derrick Henry goes out. You get a long touchdown with Justice Hill. Happened a few weeks ago. Looks like a pretty poor week from him. But you did need it, so no big deal. Did everything on the back.
Yeah.
Chloe is smelling my foot. I assume you can smell the cats. So, they're different cats. No, don't shove on my pants. These are new pants. I do not need dog claw tearing my pants right away. So, all right. And then our closest matchup, which definitely required a team name change. Just going to sneak past you. Tom with 119.58 over Drew's D- with 119.18. A 0.4 margin of victory. Tom has now won 2 matchups in less than 0.6 of a point, it feels like, the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, this one was kind of fun. I mean, looking at a lot of these players, right? I mean, Eckler putting in 23 points was really the only incredible thing that happened to Tom. Stroud did pretty poorly. You had a couple players, on the low end, Williams and Bates, that kind of exceeded expectations. But really what did it for you was Drew's players just not doing very well, right? Worthy coming in at 2, McPherson coming in at 4. 2 different wide receivers on his bench could have done better than Worthy. So even with Burrow's 37 points, it just wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, the other part of that stat was if you had just Burrow, you won 60% of your matchups. So you are in the 40% that lost it, unfortunately, but not by much. You highlighted a couple of players that I had. The only other thing I specifically denoted was the kicker matchup here. You called out McPherson with 4 over on the other side of Jake Bates with 13. That was a big deciding factor in this. That 7 points, or that, not, what is it, 9-point swing? That's pretty much decided this matchup. Those kickers are people too. So.
1 extra point would have made the difference.
Yeah. All right. Next matchup. So the next highest scoring game was Ethan's pretty good team taking down Aaron's hurt, or was it Cousin Subs hurt, don't it? 126.4 to 114.7.
Yeah, I obviously kept a close eye on this one and made some decisions early on that I thought were going to help me, and if I had done them differently, it would have all gone differently. But, Ethan ended up pulling ahead, right? Purdy getting 27 points, living up to that namesake of the team. Sutton bringing in 19. Really the only thing that went poorly for Ethan was the San Francisco defense at 4 points. The only thing he left was Hubbard with 28 points on the bench as a running back, but obviously he didn't need it. On my side, I was pretty excited going into some of this. I was watching everything, shift back and forth. We were at the bowling alley cheering when Hurts did something well. He got 30 points, but I left Pearsall on the bench, 17.3. He finally had the big week that I was hoping for from him after coming back from the gunshot, and I left him on the bench.
I mean, it was his first week back playing. It's tough to... Second week? Okay. Mm-hmm. It's tough to get him in, and when he's going to go off, but that's a first-round talent for you, right?
Yep.
The only thing that I specifically denoted here was, the Brock Purdy choice from Ethan after starting Caleb Williams for big chunks of the season. Finally decided to eject that. He cut Caleb Williams this week. And then, opting to start the San Francisco defense, which obviously did not work out for you. But it didn't matter. And then over on the other side, I had specifically called out the Jalen Hurts game, which was pretty sizable, which we definitely saw. We watched that live on Sunday during the bowling event. So. All right, next one is Eric's Wood over with 111.6 over Lee's Cut My Balls 100.2.
Yeah, so one thing I called out that was pretty interesting in this, you don't see it too often. I think we've seen it one more time this year, right? Mixon scoring exactly what he was projected at 17 points. That's always kind of fun to see. Otherwise, Murray coming in at 28. And Kelsey coming in at 20 had some pretty strong players there, even with people like Williams scoring 2 points and Shepard scoring 2 points, right? It was enough. Only thing he left on the bench was, running back Warren would have brought in an extra 10 points for him if he had put him in over Williams, but clearly didn't matter. Looking at Lee's side, it is good to see Lee lose a game. So thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. They didn't have a lot of standouts one way or the other, right? I mean, he had Henry only scoring 2 points and Boswell only scoring 4 at kicker, but otherwise a lot of them were pretty darn close to what was expected. He lost because Eric's players just outperformed.
Yeah, I mean, really, your team came in pretty close to what their projection was. It's a matter of, okay, you don't have that blowout performance where somebody goes off this week, so that really just kind of limits your overall upside. The only way that you generally win on that is if your opponent underperforms more than you, which that didn't happen here this week. So, if you look at the projections, Lee was projected to win by 5. He ended up losing by 10, underperforming quite a bit. Whereas, Eric came in 109 versus 111, pretty much right there. For Eric, the couple people I highlighted was Kyler Murray with a good game this weekend. And then Travis Kelce, I think that's probably his best game of the year so far, 20 points. And then Jason Sanders, actually, 15.7 in the Miami game. I did also highlight Javonte Williams just because I thought to call that out. So we were doing a bike ride last Saturday where we were riding from Cottage Grove to Jefferson. So it was about 20-some miles. And while we were doing that, I threw on a podcast, and I was listening to Fantasy Football Talk, and they were talking about how Audric Estime is starting to take over the backfield. So I literally told Ricky I needed to stop and get some water. And while we were doing that, I pulled my phone out and picked up Audric Estime. So hopefully that continues to trend that way. But I told her that, and she's like, "You're such a dork." It happens. So
Nice.
Who did not make it into my lineup, by the way, which maybe he should have, considering mine's the next one here to talk about. Nick and his T-Bolden girls knocking my Detective Pikachu off, 103.4 to 75.6.
My favorite part about this game was that after this week all rolled up, Nick walked up to Scott and said, "So when are you buying me wings?" And Scott said, "What are you talking about?" When I was out getting wings with Nick on Sunday, he's like, "Yeah, I have this bet with Scott, and I'm really watching it." And he just assumed they had a bet because they had.
We always do. We always bet on our matchup. I didn't follow up on it because I wasn't confident in his, and Nick apparently was also not confident. But he made the assumption, "Oh, now that he won, I really like wings. Okay, we go out for wings all the time. We just have to buy for next time, which no big deal." But.
Right. Yeah. I mean, otherwise though, right? This is another situation where Nick's team didn't necessarily outperform. It just he got lucky playing Scott. So Arizona did really, really well. 16 points. Highest scoring player on his team. Highest scoring position. Daniels did just garbage at 9 for a quarterback, right? Neighbors came in at 10 compared to the 18 he was expected to get. So just a lot of players coming in under. It just worked out. Scott, on the other hand, had a bunch of those.
all except for
Barkley and Dowdle and Kick. Yeah, you just go down the list. All of them are coming in under. A couple of them came in really, really low. Although, on the other hand, the only thing that he left on the bench was another 2 points if he had put in Wilson instead of Nix. So It just wasn't his week.
Yeah, Audric Estime sitting on my bench there. 5.3 points. Not a huge game, but it's interesting to see the touches that he's getting. He's certainly starting to get a lot of the run there in Denver. For my team, Puka was the only one that really did anything for me. I was pretty heavily in on that Dallas Eagles game. I had 4 players in that game. And Dallas's offense looks horrible right now, so that'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. And I just had bad luck that of the two Eagles players that I had, they didn't really seem to do a whole lot. Saquon kind of had an off day. Dallas was able to shut his running down, and the passing seemed to not go towards Devonta Smith at all. So it is what it is. We move on. Nick had a heck of a week, and I'll give him props for that. So he got the win here. Even though it wasn't a heck of a week. It was a heck of a week enough. And finally, our last matchup, an 87 points for Chris's Minnesota Fanboy over Scotty B and Josh's Pocket Dogs with 65.
Yeah, so Chris, again, really didn't have any huge blowout, right? In fact, quarterback, wide receiver, kicker all came in under, right? Mayfield got 9 points. Jefferson got 9 points. Tucker with only 2. So, I mean, he left a couple of points on the bench with Hill, but again, this is another one where, the projection was real close. It was supposed to be 0.15 apart, and Chris just got lucky that Scott's team started to play more like the team Josh originally drafted. So, Scott's team was it was very similar to other Scott's team. Every player, except for, I think, Dicker the kicker, came in under expectations. So, Stafford at 9, Thomas at 3. There was a few, like White on the bench would have brought another 12 points. That obviously would have brought the game right in line. If he had put in Madison at the same time, that was another 1.5 points. So that could have made the difference. But didn't make those choices.
12 points plus a 1.5 points is only going to be a total of like 14 points. He lost by 20.
Oh, you're right.
So yeah,
Sorry.
it wouldn't have mattered with the final result.
Don't math.
So last week when I was trying to trade with Derek, I was also trying to trade with Chris for one of their players that are on expiring contracts, and that didn't work out in either favor here. Justin Jefferson shit the bed this week too. So thank you, Sam Darnold. And the Minnesota love. As I texted Tom last week when it was Caitlin's birthday, I said, pass my well wishes on to your girlfriend and tell her, or your wife, I guess now, sorry, onto your wife and say, I think the Vikings might be just a little bit more overrated than the Packers. We'll see if that continues to trend that direction. So, and so in terms of updates for what's going on this week, As Nick mentioned, or Aaron mentioned earlier, Nick and I have our traditional bet where we go for wings. So the loser of our matchup has to pay for that. So that's me. So I get to buy him wings one of these days. So great. We can't wait for that. In terms of free agent pickups today and the transactions, the two big players that were like contested over were both defenses. Houston was picked up by somebody for $11. I forgot to look who that was. And then I picked up Green Bay's defense for $5 and got that one through. There were 3 players, I think, interested in both. But other than that, there were no players that were contested at all. Nick was also interested at this point knowing about what's going on with the projected standings tool that I use for fantasy football to try to guess where the playoffs are going to look. So I should show you that on the screen here now, here, or whatever, I don't know, or right here in the middle, I don't know. So I've kind of got that here. I printed it off. Looking at the numbers on that, clearly your top 3 teams, which are all really, really good, Nick, Ethan, and Lee, are already all basically locks for the playoffs. They're all ahead of everybody else in terms of points. Nick is way ahead of points with only 4 matchups to go. You'd have to lose 3 out of 4, or you'd have to lose probably 4 out of 4, or 3 out of 4, and then something crazy happens in the point standings. Those 3 teams are pretty much locked. And then going to the bottom 3 teams, the same situation happening over there with Trent, Chris, and Derek are all basically eliminated already. They're all 0 projected chance at this point of making it to the playoffs. Then you get into the middle of the pack, outside those top 3. Will is at 95% chance. Eric is at 91. Then it drops to Tom sitting at 69%, and then it drops pretty hard to my team, all the way down to 16. Drew's at 13. Aaron's sitting at 4.2%. Yeah.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, this is projections based on the standings. Now the projections, injuries happen, players blow up, things like that happen. So we will see what happens over the next few weeks. Any final words of wisdom?
Nope.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Good luck.